The last time that we met for the Liturgy of the Chalice, we were discussing that there were two things that Jesus did to prove that God's Malkuth, kingship, sovereignty, rulership, was descending to the earth. And those two things were healing people of disease, and the other was exorcism. And exorcism was a type of spiritual healing. So we discussed last time we met that these two elements, these two actions, healing from disease and sickness and healing from spiritual disease, exorcism, were two things that Mar Yeshua did to demonstrate, to show, to prove that God's Malkuth was descending to earth and would slowly spread over the earth with the awakening of each Baranash, each son or daughter of God, which is each of us. So today we're going to continue our discussion a little bit deeper, and we'll conclude this discussion for now. How is evil possible is the topic of our talk today, and also exorcism part 2. So what is it that is exorcised from a possessed or obsessed person? Last time we were talking about the fact that no matter what our personal beliefs are, Satan should be understood and demons should be understood as negative inclinations of the mind, of our thoughts, our words, and our actions. Those evil or negative thoughts, words, and actions are the real Satan, the real demons that we need to be worried about. It is what pollutes our heart. It is what lets us not become one with God. So within our hearts, there are two Yetzers. The Yetzer HaTav, which is the good or divine inclination, and the Yetzer Hara, which is the evil or negative inclination of the heart. And Satan is an allegory for the Yetzer Hara, the evil inclination of the human heart. So how is evil possible? A lot of people always ask, there can't be God. God is all good. So how can something all good allow evil in its creation? And there's a specific spiritual discussion or aspect of spirituality called theodicy. And it discusses in different traditions and different religions, how does evil emerge from a God who is good? And this is a very difficult question, and even today, in 2022, I hear many of my friends say there can't be such a thing as God, because if God was good, why do we see all these evil things happening in the world? Russia and Ukraine. School shootings every other day in the United States. Starvation. Evil governments pressing down their people. If God exists, how can he let these evils be in the world? When God saw that creation was good, how should we interpret that? In Genesis we see God finishing the creation and resting on the seventh day. And on the seventh day he looked at it and he said, this is good. A lot of us might disagree, but that depends on how we interpret good. Think about it. When people ask you on a bad day, how are you? You might reply, I'm good. I'm good. And you are relatively good, but it's not perfect, right? You're not perfect. So when God saw that creation was good, he saw that it was functional for the evolution of souls. It didn't mean that it would always feel good to us, that we'd always be happy and carefree all the time. Good simply means that it's functional. I made this creation for the evolution of souls, and it's good. How it's set up is good. Whether we humans interpret creation as good or bad, good or evil, or any other dualistic interpretation we can put on God's creation, God said that creation was good because it was functional. It served its purpose for the evolution of souls. Many Gnostic traditions interpret that the God of the Old Testament was a bad God, an evil God, and that the God of the New Testament was a good God, this unknown Father that is beyond everything, beyond creation, beyond even the Creator God, which was the bad God. And this stemmed from teachings from Marcion and other Gnostic sects. There are deeper meanings to good God and bad God that we could discuss in the future. But for now, I can say that the surface level of this statement of a good God and a bad God, taking it very literally, that there are two gods, was not a historical teaching of Jesus. The Gnostic development was significantly after the death of Jesus on the cross. For Jesus, he was an observant Jewish Rav, a Jewish master, and he followed the Hebrew Testament, what we call the Old Testament. That was his Bible, as well as other emerging intertestamental literature that happened before his birth and during the time of his life. He was a very up-to-date person, spiritually. So what was God for the historical Jesus? Here we see in this picture this anthropomorphic God, this male deity figure. And here's Jesus being all on his hands and knees. And certainly Jesus was very humble. But Jesus did not believe in an anthropomorphic God. This was something romanticized by artists and possibly by influences of the Catholic Church, etc. Mar Yeshua was influenced by the Hebrew Testament and the intertestamental literature, which would have been his Bible. For example, the Enochian literature was very important to Jesus and his disciples. Even though the Enochian literature was not part of the biblical canon decided at the Council of Nicaea, it's evident that the Enochian literature was considered sacred. All you have to do is read the Epistle of Jude. Jude talks about the sanctity of the Enochian scriptures. It wasn't sifted out, it wasn't edited out. Right there, an apostle or the school of the apostle of Jesus was saying that Enochian literature was sacred to them. So check out Jude and you'll see that Jesus and his apostles reverenced the Enochian literature, which means that they probably reverenced other intertestamental literature also. And it shaped their teaching and their message to the Amaharets, the people of the land. So Jesus was a Jewish Rav influenced by developing pre-Kabbalistic thought. We all know the prayer that Jesus' disciples say, how should we pray? And Jesus teaches them the Our Father. It begins with Abuam. Our Father, Mother is what that means. It's Abba is not just Father. When you look at the pre-Kabbalistic understanding of the Aramaic word, Abaum, you get Our Father, Mother. The name Abba is a masculine word, father, plus a feminine ending. Ab is father, Ba gives a feminine understanding of that word. So the combination of Ab and Ba can be interpreted Kabbalistically as father, mother. Abba is a Kabbalistic term which transcends the concept of gender. In other words, God was not a man, God was not a woman. In fact, he would be considered Both. Both. A mixture of masculine and feminine qualities. Androgynous. All the angels are androgynous. Whenever a soul attains kima, whenever a human being attains kima, he or she becomes like the angels. That is androgynous. Our Father, Mother, God, this sounds strange to some Christians, right? So this Father, Mother is one. It's not two gods. It's one God with both feminine and masculine characteristics. From this Abba, everything was emanated, not created, according to pre-Kabbalistic thought. Creation means that you take some pieces and you put them together and you get an end product. I get together some wood, some nails, and I create a house. But there was nothing. Genesis in many world traditions says there was just a void. There is nothing. No thingness. There is just consciousness. And from that consciousness emanated all that is. Within consciousness is thought. So it is God's thought, His word. Words are thoughts expressed, vibrations expressed. It is His thought, word, vibration that emanated everything. And this is very much in line with quantum physics. So the Abba is a formless, conscious Godhead which responds intimately to human sentiments and prayer. The Father, Mother, Abba is allegorical. Godhead is like a father, mother. Not in terms of gender. The father aspect is transcendent or beyond all of creation, and the mother aspect is immanent within creation. It can be talked to, it can be spoken to, it can be appealed to with pure love. So the Father is unknowable, and the mother aspect of God can be communicated with. However, again, the Abba did not create, it emanated creation through divine thought, divine word, or divine vibration. Ein Sof Or. Ein Sof Or, now we're getting into aspects from the Sefer Yetzirah, which is a book on Kabbalah. And these pre-Kabbalistic thoughts were already emerging just before Jesus' birth. It wasn't organized into what would become medieval Kabbalah and what most of us study, but it was a very understood form of Kabbalah. And even the medieval Kabbalah will say that their Kabbalah is from long, long ago, from Moses onward. But there's the concept of Ein Sof Or. It's a concept, and I would consider it to be a name of God as such. Ein means not. There was nothing in the beginning. It was just a void. Nothingness. So in a sense, God is not a thing. God is nothingness. God is consciousness alone. Consciousness witnessing itself. The Abba emanated non-existence or nothingness first. So the Abba, pure consciousness, emanated the void, non-existence, nothingness first. And this is a Kabbalistic creation story. The great Gnostic leader Basilides wrote, "Our Abba is non-existent, but stands prior to existence as eternal reality." So it's important to know that Abba is not the Greek word God. Abba is pure consciousness, eternal reality, what is beyond and above this creation. Ein Sof means not limited or infinite space. Humans have just begun to explore space, and it blows our mind, right? Imagine being out in space without any spaceship, right? The infinitude of that space is almost fearsome. It's awesome. It's full of wonder. So Ein Sof is not limited or infinite space. This void is infinite space that is permeated by eternal reality, by pure consciousness. Ein Sof Or is infinite light. And that's what God is. Consciousness, pure consciousness, infinite light. This is related to the Anan, which are the 7 veils of light that conceal the Abba from human perception. From the infinite light emanates the Spheroid, or vessels of the names, powers, and virtues of the Abba. So, from this infinite light, Ein Sof Or, the Abba emanated the Spheroid. There are 10 Sephirot. From the infinite light emanates the Sephirot, or vessels of the names, powers, and virtues of the Abba. There are 10 vessels, the first being Keter, or crown. These are basic names or qualities of God, such as wisdom, justice, compassion. You see them all there on the right. In our tradition, we translate, hallowed be thy name, Hashem, to may thy way be hallowed in every heart. How do we hallow God's name? All of these 10 Sephirot, Malkuth, Hokmah, Geburah, Hesed, Tiferet, Yesod, Keter, Netzach, Bina, Hod. These are all the names of God. But his names show a path. By embodying these qualities, these names of God within ourselves, we become one with God. And also by imbibing these qualities, we have an impenetrable shield against all negative energy. Nothing negative can touch us. Are we aware that negativity exists, that evil exists? Yes, we are. But if you are hallowing God's way, which is enumerated in his names, nothing can touch you. Shattering of the vessels, the Sephirot. The Abba shatters the vessels, which creates the 32 paths of Genesis, and time begins. Creation begins. The shattered parts of the vessels are called klippot, which allow for evil. Why? The things that hold things in are opposed to the liberation because they separate. They create limitation, they create separation, they create containment, they create bondage. This is the moment when duality manifests and evil with it. So in order to finish the process of emanation, and for time to begin, and for the divine plan to begin to unfold and play out before us, God had to shatter the Sephirot, the vessels. And those shards of the vessel are called klippot. And this is the source of evil in pre-Kabbalistic and Kabbalistic thought. It is only later on that klippot become allegorized as shaitan, otherwise known as Satan, and his evil spirits. All the names the demons are Babylonian deities that they wanted to smear, and they wanted people not to reverence those deities. They wanted to see them as something bad. Your God is bad, my God is good. When really there's just one God. So, fallen angels. From intertestamental literature that we have from 3rd century BCE, we begin hearing of the rebellion of Satan and the fallen angels. And this Haggadah was expanded upon with the Enochian literature, very familiar to Mar Yeshua and his disciples. Satan and the fallen angels gain power by utilizing the klipot energies. These energies of separation, of bondage, of limitation. Slaves of the fallen angels are called Elilim, literally little nothings, which exist on earth and in sublunar realms. Mar Yeshua's understanding of Satan was very clear. He most likely did not think of Satan as this evil identity, this separate, individualized being, Jesus being the good guy and Satan being another bad guy. Most likely, Mar Yeshua did not believe in a Satan outside of himself. Satan is an inner reality. It is the Yetzer Hara, the evil or negative inclination of our heart. What makes us become negative mentally, in thought, in word, in deed? That inclination, you could feel that inclination rise, right? Whenever you get pissed off, can't you feel it rise in your heart? Can't you feel it come up into your throat and you need to bite your tongue before you say something? That's how you feel the evil inclination, how you feel Yetzer Hara. So Yetzer Hara, the negative inclination itself, is Satan. And everybody needs to starve out the Yetzer Hara and encourage the Yetzer Hatov, the good inclination of the heart, to be all that exists in the heart. So the concept of Satan was moreover an allegory for the dualistic negative power of klipot, which inspire the Yetzer Hara, the negative inclination of the heart, and that negative inclination, whenever we act on it consistently, it starves out and weakens the Yetzer Hatov, the good inclination of the heart. The birth pangs of Messiah, the Baranash, that Mar Yeshua talks about in the Gospel of Mark, were caused by Satan and the klipotic energies. Satan is the selfish ego and manifestation of the Yetzer Hara, which Jesus called the prince of this olam, the prince of this world. Egotism rules this world. Just look around. Look at our governments. Look at our churches. Look at our families. Look at our workplaces. The ego is everywhere. And that's why Mar Yeshua, the Master Jesus, said that Satan, the selfish ego, which is filled with Yetzer Hara filth, that's why he said that Satan is now the prince of this world. However, Jesus said in Mark, as we discussed last time, the season has come. Make teshuvah with God. Return to God. And have fidelity with, do my proclamation, my teaching, my gospel. So we talked about it last time, that the time has come. That time is the time for God's Malkuth, God's sovereignty to take over the earth. For goodness to take over the earth. At that very moment, over 2,000 years ago, Satan the selfish ego, the clitotic forces lost. Now, God was in control. God has always been in control. However, the Malkuth only spreads as each of us becomes a Baranash, a son of mankind. As each of us grows the Yetzer HaTov and eliminates the Yetzer Hara from our hearts. Once only Yetzer HaTov remains in the heart, you become Tam, perfect, Shalom, peaceful. And then you become a Sadiq, a saint, a righteous one. And you attain Kima, or resurrection, into the 8th Olam, or the 8th sphere of reality, which is also known as the Ogdoad, where all great masters and saints live. And from there, they guide all of creation as co-sovereigns with the Abba. Satan's function in Malkuth, in this world, is to oversee the trying and testing of souls. A lot of people say, why is God testing me? Why is God tempting me? You hear it in so many churches of today's world, but it's inaccurate. In James chapter 1, verse 13, James, or one of his disciples, the school of James may have been written by James, the brother of Jesus, or perhaps it was written by the school of James. It was written by the written down remembrances of what James's disciples remembered him having said. And James says here, let no man say when he undergoes trials, I am being tested by God. Because God does not test, God does not tempt. Satan, the selfish ego, and the clipotic forces do test us, try us. And that's why we say in the Lord's Prayer, deliver us from evil, from all evil, both within, in the heart, as the Yetzer Hara, and without, as the forces of the klipot. So what is exorcised? You know, if we want to take the aspect or the assumption that Satan and the demons are personified, allegorized, negative thoughts, words, and deeds, then what is exorcised when Jesus cast out quote-unquote demons? Again, you have to understand more pre-Kabbalistic and Kabbalistic thought. And we're going to highly simplify it because we don't have enough time to go into all the deeper and higher details. But I would like to talk about 3 aspects, or the constitution, the basic 3 tiers on the bottom of the ladder of the constitution of the human soul. So there is the basar, not to be confused with basur. Basur is gospel, the proclamation God gave to Master Jesus to give to us. Basar is flesh. It is the physical body. Nefesh is the personality which experiences a second death after 40 days. So the nefesh is our personality that knows gender. When we die, we will experience what happens next after death with our nefesh. So the nefesh is your personality, it's your gender. It remembers everything you did in your life, in your physical life. And after 40 days, the nefesh dissolves and it experiences a second death. And then after that, if the soul isn't very highly evolved, it will need to reincarnate, which is called Gilgul in Hebrew. It will need to reincarnate to gain more experience and to evolve spiritually. The neshama is an aspect of what we would call a soul. There are higher levels than neshama, as described in other talks and presentations. If the neshama is very pure, it can go on to higher levels. It could stay for longer periods of time in paradise, also known as the Garden of Eden, or it can go to higher olam. Even possibly it could experience the kima, and then that soul would experience life or existence in the eighth olam, or the ogdoad. But we have to do a lot of spiritual preparation on this body. We have to eliminate the Yetzer Hara, become a Baranash, and then we could experience the Kima. And we could be part of the communion of saints and the Ogdoad. So Satan and the fallen angels, which, in this tradition, are to be understood as negative thoughts, selfish egoic drives, and evil emotions, control nefeshes, which were greatly evil in their physical lifetimes. These evil nefesh are called elilim, or little nothings. So, what possesses or obsesses people? Nefeshes that were human, but they were very evil, very debased, very negative. And when these nefeshes that are very evil, they don't want to die. They don't want to experience the second death. So in order not to experience the second death, they would become like a parasite. And they would attach themselves to a living human being. And they would be taking vital force from that living human being to continue their own life. This may sound like a storybook for a horror movie, but I can tell you, I've literally seen this. And not just in a vision or a dream, but literally with two physical eyes open. I've seen what I called psychic vampires. And that's exactly what an evil nefesh is that doesn't want to die. This personality that was so evil while living on the earth, it just does not want to die. It wants to continue to live as it had. And at that point, whenever these evil nefeshes become inspired by the clipotic forces, they become called an elilim. And this elilim, or evil nefesh, is what possesses or obsesses people. I mean, look at your most evil criminals and the Hitlers of the world. These beings were definitely possessed. Definitely. And if they weren't possessed, when they lost their lives, they definitely were those kinds of things, those kind of evil nefeshes that tried to possess others to continue their evil ways. Again, this is not a story. I've experienced it for myself. Those that want to hear more about it, we can talk in private. What is exorcised continued? The Elilim are vampiric in nature and are rightly called psychic vampires. These creatures, for lack of a better word, are what inspire the idea of vampires in movies and TV shows that you see today. The idea of a vampire is really just an elilim, an evil nefesh that is sucking life force, life energy from a human host. So I have seen and experienced these things. They are very real. They drain the energy or life force of the human, animal, or elemental host. I've only seen these beings hovering over and being behind, so to speak, human hosts. So I've never seen them personally around animals or elemental elements of the world. Jewish masters used Solomonic magic and the authority of archangels to cast out possessing or obsessing entities. Mar Yeshua cast them out without Solomonic magic. He just used the power of his oneness with God, the power of his spirituality. because he did not exercise as the Jews did in his day. He was accused as being in league with Satan. So whenever he did not exercise with these elaborate rituals that the Jewish masters used at his time and before his time, he was actually accused of being in line with or friends with Satan, so to speak. So, which is incorrect. Of course, Mar Yeshua is one of the most purest beings ever. Just the purity of a master, a real saint, a real tzaddik, they just need to look at you, and any negative possessing or obsessing being can leave immediately. They don't need any special incantations or sigils or stuff like that. Jesus just used the power of his voice. He demanded the entity's name, and when you have the entity's name, you have control over it, and then he'd cast it out. For those who are vulnerable to possession and obsession, a lelim will enter in through the nape of the neck in the cases of obsession, or through the solar plexus in cases of possession. Such an entity must be removed by a trained exorcist. When the elilim is removed, that nefesh will experience the second death, which it will vehemently try to avoid. And it must slowly go up the evolutionary ladder of spiritual growth again, through the course of many reincarnations. Mar Yeshua gave 72 of his disciples the power to exercise. And this tradition is still being taught and implemented today through apostolic succession. I hope this talk was interesting for you and useful. Let us continue with the Liturgy of the Chalice.